Okay, it is now 7 o'clock, so we're gonna get started with tonight's guest session. I am thrilled to introduce you all to William Lovett. He is the managing director of Phoenix Air Unmanned, as well as an Embry-Riddle alumnus. Phoenix Air Unmanned is a specialized UAS operations company that's based in Cartersville, Georgia. It was established in 2014 as a sister company to the Phoenix Air Group, which is a FAA Part 135 airline, as well as has been a DOD contractor for over 30 years. Will adopted the high standards of the Phoenix Air Group and is committed to implementing best practices in unmanned flight. He's maintained an active role in civil and military aviation and holds an FAA ATP rating with fixed wing and helicopter type ratings. During his 28 years with the U.S. Army, Will flew domestic and international missions for Med Evac, combat support, and operational support airlift. He's a graduate of the U.S. Army UAS Command and Staff course and retired in 2015 as a Chief Warrant Officer 5 after his last assignment with the U.S. Army Aeronautical Services Agency. Will's professional background includes 20 years in leadership and management positions within the aviation insurance and risk management industry, including AIG Aviation, Allianz, and Willis Global Specialties. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in 1991 and has served on boards for the Atlanta Aero Club, Embry-Riddle's President's Advisory Board, and the Aviation Insurance Association. He's also an active volunteer for the Veterans Airlift Command and Army Aviation Heritage Foundation. So with that, I would like to welcome Will Lovett. And I've screen shared, or I've made you a co-host, so you can, if you have anything you want to share, whatever.
Thanks, Brent. I appreciate that, and hello, everybody. Pleasure to meet you all. Just a quick question: is this standard size for master's class?
So this is, we have in our class we have 22. So this is a pretty good turnout. I invited some folks from one of our other classes as well, but yeah, this tends to be about right.
Okay, perfect. Well, I am working from home, and my neighbor decided to mow the grass as soon as you kick this off. So if it starts getting loud, I apologize, but I think we'll manage through it. Let me get to my PowerPoint here. You see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, super. Thanks for the introduction. I got about 10 slides here that I will go over, give you a little overview of what we're doing at Phoenix Air Unmanned, and really like to hear from you and get some questions about what we're doing, and obviously how this might apply to what you all are studying right now. I will, as Brent mentioned, it's very interesting. The company Phoenix Air Group is a 40-year-old defense contractor and Part 135 airline. So we are known throughout the world as doing the strange and unusual with aircraft. So we play military games, electronic warfare. We do a lot of launching of missiles, target towing. We haul munitions, we haul fireworks, different things that you just typically don't see from 135 airlines. So we really are born from the unusual things. We're a privately held company, and the owners saw the growth in the UAS industry 6-7 years ago, and I happened to be social friends with the owner, and he asked me about my experience with unmanned and what I thought about the commercial application. And a few short meetings after that, I was offered a position to come and stand up a division for Phoenix Air Group. So very honored to have the 20 years in aviation insurance and the military background, but I really have enjoyed the last 6-7 years of standing up Phoenix Air Unmanned. A little bit of tragedy that also brought me to this point. After getting back from the military, I did a tour over in Iraq in 03 and 04. And when I came back, a very dear friend of mine returned to his job as a helicopter pilot and was actually killed by putting his tail rotor into a power line. And with my experience and what I'd seen, I said, I sure would like to see an application of using unmanned systems to do the inspections of power lines. And so what you're about to see is, some tragedy, and hopefully creating the regulatory enablement to allow drones to do some, if not all, of this work at some day without the risk of human life of inspecting power lines. As I mentioned, we were formed in 2014. Really, the mission was I wanted to take the all of the standards and all of the maintenance and the training and all of the guidelines that work with 135 and defense contractors and apply those to build out a company that would be a complex operation service provider. Really wasn't focused exclusively on the utility world at that point, but we quickly realized there was a demand for it, there was a budget for it, and we had a lot of interested parties, as you can see to the right, that really wanted us to engage and find a way to do this. Right now, we're 20 employees. We have about 12 RPICs. The requirement to have and a 107 is obvious, but we self-impose the restriction of having every one of the RPICs have at least a private pilot certificate. And that started 6 years ago with thinking, okay, we want to fly BVLOS. We think the FAA is going to require a higher standard. We don't know what it's going to be, if it's a unique certificate for BVLOS or what, but at minimum, we wanted everyone to have a private pilot certificate. We have a lot of Embry-Riddle graduates that are current employees, as well as others, but they all have their private pilot certificate. So since we received our Beyond Visual Line of Sight waiver in 2019, I put a couple of statistics together. A little over 8,000 total circuit miles flown in the last 3 years, over 500 hours, and close to 2 million images captured. And that's for one utility, Xcel Energy, and they have a infrastructure in 10 states. So the most we've been able to accomplish is a little over 100 miles in a day. And this will all become a little clear to you as I go through. I've got some illustrations of our CONOP. So our current waiver is issued to Xcel Energy. Again, a lot of work. We probably spent 2 years doing validation and verification and testing, and tremendous amount of reporting to the FAA showing that our system works. And it's probably about 800 pages was our submission to the FAA for consideration for this waiver. It is pretty unique. We do have .31, .33 waived, but the unusual part is .39, operations over human beings. So a lot of that relates to a lot of work that we did to show the population density over the areas that we wanted to fly, and meaning they're rural areas. And the system that we use, I wouldn't call it DAA, it's more like airspace surveillance, because there is nothing that we can carry on board right now that's certified, and we're already at max gross weight at 55 pounds. So I'll walk you through a little bit, and you can see what we did to achieve these waiverable areas. The two platforms that we're using, one is an AeroVironment Vapor 55. It started out as a company in Lawrence, Kansas, and was acquired by Air Unmanned about 2 or 3 years ago. We have 4 of these aircraft, 45-minute endurance with the payload that we currently fly. That's at max gross weight at 55 pounds. We like this aircraft because we can integrate many different payloads. Right now, the sensors that we're using is a dual phase 1. So just they are fixed mounted, no gimbals. We have one at a 45-degree angle forward and one at a 60-degree angle rear. And their cameras are firing every second. So we're only doing one-way flights. I'll get this a little bit into the CONOP. one-way flight, so we're taking images of the structure, as we approach it and after we pass. The other system is a free fly system, Alta X, made out in Seattle, Washington. Free fly, some of you may know, really these platforms were created for the movie industry, heavy lift aircraft, very durable, very reliable, very affordable. Price point is about $20,000 per unit, and compared to the AeroVironment, which is about $100,000. So different profiles. We do use the aircraft in different areas. Some are a little more temperature sensitive than others. So depending on what state and where we're at, we will pick the platform we want to use. Obviously, like the ability to interchange payloads with the Alta X as well. We also operate four of the Alta X. Our logic with that is when we're in the field, the flight season for the utility work that we do is typically from May to November. The utility wants leaves on trees and various other reasons why they want that window of flight. So when I reference the flight season, that's usually that period of time. What we have worked on with L3Harris and a few other contractors is trying to replace or complement the visual observer with an electronic observer. L3Harris is the provider of radar services to the FAA, so we included their system called RangeView that allows us to bring in live radar feeds to our ops vans. Includes ADS-B as well as ground-based radar. All of that system helps us find any aircraft that could be operating in our area. We do operate, this is an old picture, it shows the RPIC to the left there in the van. And we had to clarify our waiver a little bit after briefing the FAA, and they intended us to be outside the van at all times. So we actually moved that position to an articulating arm with a GCS on the door. So the RPIC is always outside, always with an earshot of the visual observer who can let us know if there is an intruder that's coming into our area. Again, we're flying at definitely below 400 feet AGL, definitely Class G airspace, rural areas, low population density. And as we have in 3 years never had an encounter and never even come close. Typically aircraft don't like power lines, so we felt this is a good area that the FAA would see the likelihood of finding another aircraft, fixed wing manned aircraft in this area would be unlikely. But I'll get to some of that as well in a second. Excuse me. So the profile is that we're flying 100 foot over the structure and we're remaining inside the corridor, utility corridor, as we fly, plus or minus 20 feet to the left or right. To take a quality image of the structure, we need to really be right over the structure. So a lot of the work that we do to flight plan is done well before we get on site. The ability to fly and fly safely to mitigate both the air and the ground risk is through infrastructure shadowing and infrastructure masking. So as I mentioned, we're 100 foot over the utility lines. We use every structure as a waypoint. So when we build out our flight plans, we're essentially going from one structure to another. We get all of the structure data from the utility. We build that into our flight plans. And so number one, it helps us get directly over the structure so we can take the images. That's what we're getting paid to do, is take images for inspection. But that also is a second reason we need that GIS data, is because if we have a lost link, we have programmed the aircraft to fly to the next waypoint, which is the next structure. So instead of returning home or returning to an unknown area, we've told the aircraft, if you lose link, stay in the safest area that we know there is, and that's right in the corridor, right over the utility. So again, so far that has worked, and in this unique environment, has been able to satisfy the FAA's needs of a equivalent level of safety. If someone comes into, we call them an intruder, that comes into our operating area, our procedure would be to come to a hover with an aircraft and to offset by 20 feet and descend. So we're at least the maximum height of the structure. If an aircraft is flying that close to a structure, he's gonna be hitting a structure as well as us. So that is a procedure. We've never had to do it, but that is what we presented to the FAA as a maneuver. If we saw an encounter imminent, that would be our position. I think on the right, I can't see because of my screens, but yes, there is a sample here of an example. We have to stay 5 miles away from airports. So lots of airports out there, and we will fly BB loss. By the way, the max leg length of our flights is about 10 miles. We have C2 range issues, and we have aircraft endurance issues, so we won't fly anything beyond 10 miles. If we get into an area like you see on the right, and we are coming within a 5-mile distance, then we simply go back to line of sight operations. And as you might imagine, with a tasking of several thousand miles to fly in 1 year, when you have to stop and resort to line of sight flights, it really does slow things down. So we're looking for ways to satisfy the FAA to fly at least 3 miles to the airport, and other ways that they would want to see this would meet an equivalent level of safety. So here's a illustration of our CONOP. We have 2 operating vans. The aircraft would launch from operating van 1, launched in position on altitude, and the RPIC would essentially, once they're above the first structure, tell it to fly the mission. And it's autonomous from that point on until you get about halfway down the leg. So we'll call it a 10-mile flight for this illustration. At that point, we do a handoff from the RPIC 1 to RPIC 2, which is in Ops Band 2, 10 miles down the line. We have electronic observers in both sides. We have ground-based radar in both vans. So everyone is seeing the same thing, and we have comms with both of the RPICs as well. Very structured procedures of talking through the handoff, very structured process with a checklist. And obviously we've done that quite a bit before we started flying this in the field. In the middle there, you'll see, basically all the definitions of what we stay within Class G, 100 feet of the structure, 5 miles away from the airport. We do file NOTAMs for all of the flights. We do deconflict with Excel Energy. They have manned helicopters doing similar flights same day, and we actually have they have a transmission control that we have to call daily and let them know what circuits we're flying, and they will let us know if there's a helicopter anticipated in the area. That is one of the greatest risks that we see, is experiencing another helicopter doing similar work on the line that we didn't know about. The other exposure is ag. We see a lot of ag planes, and they are flying low. So usually the first indication that we have is not through any of our electronic observer, it's eyes and ears. But that is the 2 greatest risks that we see. Some imagery here. So we have some specific specs. Again, the main use of what we're doing and have been doing for the client, Excel Energy, is creating a baseline of imagery for their circuits. The typical method that most utilities use is CVI, comprehensive visual inspection, which is anywhere from a ground inspection, 2 guys, a clipboard, and some cameras, or through a helicopter with somebody looking through binoculars, flying at 30 or 40 knots and trying to find faults. So hard to do storm and restoration and change detection if you don't have a baseline. So the mission 3 years ago was to image all of the transmission lines for Xcel Energy. We are tasked right now with 5,000 miles for this year. We're in Texas right now, and about a little over 3,000 miles through with the project. We anticipate, based on all of the lines that Xcel has, that we will hopefully have the entire grid for that utility complete by next year. We do some LiDAR work. The utility likes to use this for vegetation management. We fly the VUX-1 on both of these aircraft, the Alta X and the Vapor 55. Again, the typical use is with a helicopter, pretty expensive. We really are competitive, price competitive with this application for small projects. Usually, you're under 100 miles. If you need LiDAR for over 100 miles, it's going to be less expensive to get a helicopter mobilized to get on site. But we do have quite a bit of requests for this. So our approach again was really about trying to mirror what works in today's 135 world. Argus is a well-known third-party audit firm. We worked with Argus to understand and help create some of the standards for unmanned aircraft systems. So through that process of helping, sort of doing a beta audit, they created standards, and we've been audited every other year since that and have their highest rating. So we obviously show the utility, the FAA, and other things that, it's one thing to have your procedures and your standards, but you have to prove that you actually follow them. Safety management systems, obviously safety is paramount. We have got a lot of reputational risk as well as a lot of risk with the waiver that we have, and we definitely respect that quite a bit. So we're trying to take all of the tools out there to help us with our SMS system. Right now, Prism is the tool that we use for that. We capture a lot of information through Prism, and all of the flights go through a flight risk analysis prior to any flight. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, or if that's something you've seen through your coursework, but basically it's all the elements that go through trying to evaluate if it's an acceptable level of risk for our flight. The crew get enough sleep? Is the aircraft been maintained? Is the weather okay? There's about 35, 40 questions that we go through daily and assign a number to it. And basically, once that's totaled, if it's below a certain level, then the RPIC has the authority to continue. And then the next level, if it's higher than that, our director of ops has to approve it. And if it's above that, then it comes to me for final approval. So we've never had anyone that has gone to that point. I think it would be an extremely high risk for me to have to approve that, and I probably wouldn't. We use a system called Alaris Pro for maintenance tracking. Again, we're trying to predict failures. A lot of the aircraft that we have, there's just not a lot of tracking of components to see when they might fail. So out of the gate, we wanted to start logging the hours and how many cycles, so we could get an early notice of when something might fail. So again, this is information the FAA wants to see and does see. We have a lot of reporting requirements to show the FAA our daily reports and tracking and maintenance. Training is a huge part. Again, all of our RPICs are current private pilots. They are current VFRs. They are current within 90 days. We have a flight school, so we ask for all of them to maintain their currency in manned aircraft. We do annual training with the Unmanned Safety Institute. I know the TOPS program is also out there at this point. We've been using the USI system. Every one of our pilots goes through their safety training every 2 years. Cyber and security is huge, because we are a defense contractor. We're a secure facility. This data we're capturing is of the U.S. critical infrastructure. So it's important that we, keep that data in a safe place, and we present our facility infrastructure to the utility so they know that we're managing that data correctly. One of the biggest challenges we have is data. As you saw earlier, a little under 2 million photos, images taken over the last 3 years, and you get into LiDAR, and the data is extremely challenging. We're an aviation company. We really want to stay focused on what we do well, and that's aviation. We do have some folks that do manage our data. Our IT department is not really set up for this level of data, so we do look for third parties to help with both post-processing and storage. But it is our biggest challenge, and something that I have been asking with my involvement with the school is, trying to get some level of baseline on GIS and data organization, data storage from some of their students, as we usually hire about 4 or 5 Embry-Riddle students as interns every year. And, we start introducing to some of this requirement, and it's usually the first time they've seen it. But that is definitely an area that is difficult for us. I know I went through that quick, Brent, but I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you lead some questions and go back to the group.
Outstanding. Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Great. So we'll really appreciate that. That was some really good, insightful material for the students, especially given what we're studying this week, where we're looking at unmanned versus manned systems, how and why you would select various options. Getting into something that you just talked about, you mentioned the need to log maintenance details so that you can gain a better understanding of long-term implications and performance projections associated with things like mean time between failure, as well as the challenges you have associated with data capture, storage, and analysis. What are some of the other pressing technological problems that you're having to address right now? What, maybe it's up and coming technology that you're looking at, something that's promising, but you envision that in the next couple of years, that would be a good area for students to really come to field prepared in?
Well, the biggest burden right now for us is, we're governed by the FARs that keep us at 55 pounds. And, we want to go further. We want to carry more. The holy grail for the utility is, multiple sensors. So we can do one pass, we get LiDAR, we get, RGB. So, with that, we know there are some aircraft that, are reciprocating engines and stuff like that. But I think the most interesting application that we've seen so far is with fuel cells. Several of companies that we are working with right now have some fuel cell technology, and it works, but the size, weight, and issues with integrating that into unmanned aircraft is just not going to keep us under 55 pounds. So, they know the regs require us to be under 55 pounds. So they are trying to get this into a form factor where we can integrate it on the aircraft and give us almost twice the endurance for the aircraft, which is fantastic. But then that opens up another challenge, is we're going to outfly our C2. Again, we're really restricted right now to about 10 miles with the current C2 arrangement we have. And we have latency issues with SATCOM and weight issues and other things. So those two areas are the biggest challenge for us.
So leading into some of the discussion in federal regs, have you been, or if you have been, how have you been affected by potential conflict between national, state, and local regulations and laws. You know, as you operate across states in different environments, have you experienced any issue with one set of requirements overriding or confusing an overall issue?
Yeah.
Something that leads to preemption.
Yeah. Well, so we do have a, excuse me, we do have a dispatch function. So we have a dispatcher in our office, and he or she is responsible for all those typical things, checking NOTAMs and all of the requirements. They actually will, send the flight plans to the crews in the field and a lot of other things, to including calling the local airports and letting them know that we're going to be in the area. We actually go as far as calling the local ag operators to let them know we're in the area. I say that just to set up that we do a lot to know where we're at and let people know what we're doing, so that if we do have issues with law enforcement or whoever, that we've done enough to tell people what's going on. All right, so two issues. One, there is, I think it's in the state of Minnesota, I don't know if it's a city or county, but there is an ordinance that forbids unmanned flight. And we're operating in 10 states. And at this point, I don't have a resource that tells me what city and county forbids unmanned aircraft. And yeah, we got stopped. And yes, we got the sheriff that said, pack up your vans and get out of town. And we had to call the utility and say, hey, you got about a 20-mile gap in your circuit imagery because it's illegal to fly there. I don't know how, laws change. So, I mean, I just don't know if there's a resource for us to find that granular level of, there's no drone flying in this county. State-wise, some are a little more challenging. Minnesota is treating unmanned aircraft like manned aircraft. So they want to tax us. You have to register the aircraft with the state. You have to pay a tax. You have to get an operating certificate. It's very expensive. I mean, for every aircraft that we own, and it's a percentage of the value of aircraft. So, as you might guess, we picked the cheaper aircraft to operate in Minnesota because we have to pay a yearly tax. So I don't know if that answered, some of your question there, but I think it's really applicable with the local ordinances that get us, I wouldn't say hot water, but we're just sort of like, hey, didn't you know that it's illegal to fly a drone here? Well, no, we didn't. We're flying 5,000 miles in 10 different states. And at this point, we just don't know that level.
That's perfect. Because we're seeing all kinds of issues across the board with, some states are extremely friendly. They want the business, they want the operations, they recognize, even at the public operations level, that incorporation of this technology into their services, it saves lives, it makes things more efficient, it helps them to accomplish their goals, and honestly make their constituents that much more happy, because they're not constantly flying rotary wing overhead. They're able to get into places pretty adeptly and quickly. So, and they're able to, most important to most governments, especially at the local level, they're able to keep the costs low to not impact taxes, not make taxes go up. So it's interesting to see that in the states where they really haven't maybe recognized that utility yet, where they've instead looked at it from the commercial side as a source of revenue. I think over time, we're going to see it all shake out. I mean, we look at what happened within aviation in and of itself, the manned aviation side, where we have much more standard uniformity. At the moment in the unmanned side, it's more of the quote unquote patchwork quilt. We have, a lot of different overlapping regulations or laws that call out more or less the same thing. They're trying to protect their citizenship through, privacy protections and oversight. But it really, at the end of the day, what I'm observing is it's all about education and informing, keeping the local legislator, the commissioners, the folks that you're at that level, helping them to understand how the technology works and really, the most applicable way to go forward with it, so everybody's happy.
Well,
Uh,
by far, the most people that we run into, whether it be a property owner or law enforcement, by far, they are very supportive and very interested in the technology. And, the typical response is, I had no idea that, a drone could do that. Um, and then you start to realize, okay, if you went through the traditional method of inspection, of a helicopter flying at low level, at low airspeed, making a lot of noise, scaring your cows and your horses and everything else, I think you would probably prefer a electric drone that's, almost silent. But it's a matter of getting the public educated that, we're not out there spying on them. We're taking pictures of utility lines.
you're spot on, I think, with that one. So what tools or resources do you use personally to stay informed? And what are some of the challenges of sifting through all that material?
It is huge. I do look to AUVSI as an organization to really catch what's going on. It is, it's hard to decipher that because there's a lot of headlines that are published that are just headlines, and there's really not a lot of meat behind it. Technology is changing so rapidly. We're eager to find out, what new systems out there, what new payload enhancements, detect and avoid technology, C2. We go to a lot of the conferences, AUVSI conference. The expo was here in Atlanta a few weeks ago. Pick up a lot of knowledge there. Didn't make it to the Commercial Aviation conference in Vegas this week. There's a few conferences that we attend. One specifically, there is a utility, gas and utility conference in Houston that we try to attend every year. That's our sweet spot, is linear infrastructure. So we don't exhibit to these. We really don't get business from conferences like that. It's more of learning what's out there and anything else that we can do to enhance our current operation.
Outstanding. And there are, I think the FAA UAS symposium is coming up completely online. I'll try to share that with the class. I'll put that in the discussion area. So, mentioning, you started talking about some advocacy groups. We both sit on one, the National Business Aviation Association's Emerging Technology Committee. What other professional organizations or even certifications and activities would you recommend students that are interested in getting into this field? What should they be exploring? What would help make them really competitive?
Well, HAI is another, so the Helicopter Association International, and just like the MBAA, they have I don't know if it's called a committee or advisory, but they have specific members that are focused on what's going on unmanned and how this might impact the helicopter industry. So definitely HAI is another. I don't know the associations or industries that relate to GIS, if there is such a thing. But again, that's an area that I would admit we are weak on. It's just because, we're focused on staying in our lane of what we're good at, and that's, aviation. But we know enough to securely store the data and send it to a third party that can do the post-processing. But that is key. A lot of the resumes that we review and want to know more about is any reference to GIS, whether it would be a classwork or a specific project, but just some introduction to GIS is really helps to be marketable.
Outstanding. Let's see, I've got a couple more. What guidance do you have for those that are they're really trying to figure out what they would like to do in this field? As far as operational roles, like in your organization, if you've got a student that they're thinking more of the analytical versus being a pilot, what are some ways that they can help to discern that?
Yeah, so again, a lot of the roles that we have within our organization, we're built like a typical flight department. So we have a chief pilot, we have a director of maintenance, we have dispatch, we have engineering, safety. Basically a lot of the, we'll call them line pilots, have additional duties that they bring to the table. Some want to focus on flight planning, and so they want to dig in and find ways to help us flight plan more efficiently and more effectively. Others want to get in and do CAD work and help us design different things that either lighter, stronger, or fabricate a different mount for an aircraft to integrate a different sensor. We do have some 3D printing abilities within Phoenix Air, as well as we've got a CNC machine that is for the manned aircraft side, but they will make mounting brackets and various other pieces for us if they're too large to 3D print. But it all starts with a design. So a lot of the folks that really help us in many ways can visualize a need and help create that, and then actually fabricate it and then integrate it. So having that ability to have a problem and find the solution is a big help.
Excellent. Well, on that, I would like to turn it over to the class. This is your opportunity to really take what you've examined the last 6 weeks from the UAS perspective, and get Will's thoughts on that. Help use this opportunity while you do have somebody who has so much expertise in field and experience operationally to ask questions relating to our topics. So, Stephen, looks like you're. There you go.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. I don't want to take up a whole lot of time though. Mr. Lovett, thank you so much. It's so much information, and I have a ton of questions. But first and foremost, you named off several different systems for flight management, risk management, maintenance tracking, safety, stuff like that. Do you have one single platform that you can access all of those, or are you having to access that at multiple stations? Because I would think that you would have a single access platform.
We do not. So you are correct. They are multiple, and I wish we had a turnkey that would be able to provide all of that to us. And we know that there are some systems that might do 2 out of the 4 or whatnot, but migrating all of the historical data over there is just at this point not in the cards for us. That's another thing that we try to get spooled up on, is who has got a platform that is robust that we can basically use it for all of those systems. And at this point, I haven't found it.
You would think that would be like you coming from the manned side to the unmanned side. You'd think that there would be some package available for that. Dr. T, can I ask 1, maybe 2 more questions? I don't want to take up a ton. Okay. You had talked about that you're maxed out at 55 pounds with Part 107, and that you had an 800-page report that you submitted. You got your waivers. You were able to do all this stuff for BVLOS, but wouldn't you already have all the data to be able to go to Title 49 of the U.S. Code, Chapter 448, and get like airworthiness or non-conforming waiver associated with that to go over 55 pounds? So, maybe I misunderstand that. Maybe I misunderstand the Title 49 and the information that I've consumed about it, but I would think that would be a.
So here's another piece too that I left out, but great question. The waiver that we're currently flying was issued for 3 years. It expires at the end of October. So we have been desperately working on what's next, and with the FAA and trying to build out what can we do. The interesting things to consider is, since this waiver was issued 3 years ago, the laws have changed. So the FAA has more or less said, we can't grant you anything close to what you have now because the laws have changed. They don't have the ability to do that. So we are working on various different waivers for what's next. One includes a heavy lift aircraft, which is turbine powered helicopter, and it's 200 pounds. And we have a petition for an exemption under consideration right now. It has been with the FAA for a year, but as you might guess, it's pretty complex and there's a lot of questions about it. And all I can say, it's been in their hands for a year, and you add COVID to the mix. There's been just a lot of delay, but we're patient, and hopefully, we'll have some news soon.
That Title 49 of the U.S. Code, the 44807, that was just updated on the 1st of September.
Yes.
And the very last question I had for you, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, sir?
Well, I was just gonna, if I didn't say this would operate under Part 91. So you're right, 44
okay.
is the petition for exemption.
Yeah.
And we would operate under
91. Okay. And I wanted to ask, do you see this going into a city or whatever? But you had stated that on the BV loss waiver, that you had foreseen that there to be a potential for more. So do you feel like you've wasted money by having your unmanned pilots trained as manned pilots in addition to, or was that a player, because you didn't identify that as being a player in you getting the waiver? And so I assume that you see value in it, but do you think it was a factor?
Couple of good points there. It was not a factor on us getting any approval. So it wasn't like the FAA said, oh, well, you got a bunch of private pilots, so then go forth and fly BV loss. It had nothing to do with it in my eyes. But on the second side of the coin there, I want people working for us that have a passion for aviation. And I have, through the years, enjoyed working with people that enjoy aviation, period. And, I'm a pilot, have been, and, there's just nothing I'd rather be doing than flying. And I want to be around like-minded people that enjoy, appreciate flying. So I think a private pilot brings a different baseline of experience. You've got, you get your airspace knowledge and all those things through 107, but I think the practical skills of flying, communication skills, aeronautics, weather, I just want a higher baseline than what you get as 107. So that really is, again, our self-imposed restriction.
Well, I do have a ton of questions, but I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate you answering my questions, and I really appreciate your presentation today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next up we have Raquel, and then I believe it'll be David, and then Juan.
Hi, William. Thank you
Hello.
for sharing your story with us. I had a few questions. Do you plan on expanding your services and either more types of inspections and customers in the future?
Yes, we do. So as I mentioned, I'd say 80% of what we do today is with one customer. And that's, 20 people that supports that operation. Another piece of that I had left out. So as I mentioned, we leave in April, we don't come back until November. When the ground support vehicles leave, they don't come back for months. But we rotate our crews out. So we will send a crew out to the field for 10 days and then send them back and then relieve them with another crew. So obviously I've got to have a mirrored crew, a lot of RPICs and a lot of support staff to be able to give the crew rest for the people who have been in the field for that long. So long way to answer your question is, this is one utility and there's a huge demand for this for many other utilities. A lot of them are waiting to see what us and Excel are able to achieve, and if there's going to be regulatory enablement to allow heavier aircraft to fly further and to fly into some other populated areas. So before they make the investment, I think they really want to see the FAA introduce some regulations that will allow this.
And which areas are you looking to expand services into? And which ones are the ones that have more regulations or more restrictions that you have come across?
So the immediate need is, again, the transmission, electric utility, linear infrastructure inspection. So lots of transmission lines out there, lots of utilities. So we certainly want to expand to other clients that have this need. But similar to that, you've got the railroads, which obviously need linear infrastructure inspection, as well as gas line. We know BNSF and others are quite accomplished in this, so they really don't need a third-party service provider. But there's others out there that do, and the oil and gas pipeline industry, very similar to electric utilities. So we definitely see that as a growth area.
And you mentioned earlier that this type of inspection was more of a cost-effective option for your customers. And I just wanted to clarify some of the numbers that you mentioned. Was it 20,000 versus 100,000 as previously done in traditional methods?
The cost of those aircraft, so the one from Air Environment is approximately 100,000 per aircraft, and the Alta X is approximately 20,000. That's for the aircraft, and then the payload, the current payload that we are flying is about $80,000, and that's for the 2 cameras. And you've got to have backup, so you got to add that times 2. So there's 2 pairs of additional cameras for backups. A lot of other, operations vans, pneumatic masts, generators, huge investment. At this point, our goal is to be on par or hopefully less than a helicopter inspection method, but we're not there yet. Because as you can see, we've got to move around a lot of crews, and we can only accomplish so much in a day. Our greatest, achievement's been 105 miles in a day. But we want to fly more per day and try to get done with the project, within the 8-month time period.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
David, I believe you have a question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Am I coming through clearly?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Lovett. Thank you for your presentation. Your insight, at least for me, was very, very informative, because I don't have any personal experience yet in this field, aside from the coursework. So getting your perspective was, it really helped solidify, at least in my mind, how things kind of operate, and your approach to everything is definitely interesting. You mentioned that it was really interesting hearing about your safety management system, and you mentioned from the maintenance side of things. You mentioned that it's difficult to determine how long certain parts on these aircraft might last. Like, so for manned aircraft, everyone's probably pretty familiar with like life limited components, time before overhaul, things like this. You also mentioned that you had an engineering department, and you worked on CNCing your own mounting equipment, things like that. I have some similar experience with government organizations in the past, and we had similar departments. We sort of followed, being government, we were exempt from normal federal regulations on that, but we had our own in-house process. So I'm curious about what your thoughts are on where this might go regulation-wise, and how that might drive the costs. So if parts, if the process of getting parts certified through the FAA becomes more expensive because they have to verify things like time before overhaul, do you see that driving the cost up on your types of operations? And potentially could it even approach manned systems?
Yeah, so the current effort right now for the FAA is to get type certification for some aircraft. And if you want to fly a BV loss going forward, they want you to fly a type certified aircraft. The Air Environment Vapor 55 is going through that process. So we've worked with Air Environment over the last 4 years. They know we are the largest user of that system, and therefore we represented the perfect opportunity for them to achieve their 375 incident-free hours with that's needed for a type certificate. So we hope that is the case and it gets certified. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, Brent, but the TC process is somewhat stalled out right now, but there is an effort to do that, and they have an application, and we are going through, hoping that aircraft gets TC'd. It will increase the cost. There's no doubt about it. I'd say some of the folks that are more experienced than me tell others that you can expect, no less than a couple of $1 million in 3 to 4 years for an aircraft to get through a TC process. So they got to recover that cost somehow, and it's going to, be passed along to the buyers. And that probably goes into your question about the component parts. It's not going to be TC'd unless they can demonstrate the reliability of these parts, and that's going to increase the cost.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. I hope it doesn't get too crazy, because certainly on the manned side of things, it can get pretty crazy in terms of what those types of components cost in terms of operating, due to all the certifications that are required. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate your answer.
Yeah, I'm sorry for use of all the acronyms and stuff. I just ask me if I start spitting out things that don't make sense, but yeah. TC
Yeah,
is
no, it's hard to operate in some of these types of fields without all those acronyms.
Yeah.
Well, that is a good point that you bring up, how the inclusion of the type certification process, that is a cost that ends up being passed on to the end consumer. It's also, you can see that mirrored in DOD systems, unmanned aircraft and really any equipment that's produced for the DOD environment. It has to be prepared in accordance with standards. It has to, and you have to provide a certain level of documentation, including operation and maintenance instructions. You've got to have training available for it. So all the stuff that gets really baked into the design, that's why you end up with, say, perfect example would be the Lockheed Martin Indigo platform. It's about $20,000 for a quad rotor. And you can go down the street and you can go to DJI and you can pay $4,000 for what may on the outside be a comparable technological system. It's the level of support that drastically differs. It's the level of testing and certification that go into each single piece that's on that Lockheed Martin produced platform. And that's really what you're paying for in the difference. So the same's true, across the board in our field. I want to open up, I think Juan had a question, then we'll go Steve, and then Esteban. And I think we'll have to probably call it at that, because we've had a extremely productive night here.
Hi, sir. Thank you for your presentation. If you're currently in the military and you have a certain MOS outside of this field, but we're interested in reclassing, would you recommend the 15 Whiskey job, which is a unmanned operator, or what job in the military would you recommend to set yourself up to work at a company such as PAU?
Yeah, absolutely. We have several employees that have been shadow operators, Predator, both Air Force and Army. And Yeah, I mean, it's a different flight environment, obviously different aircraft, but the basis is you get it. You understand the safety piece, the flight planning, the structure. So absolutely, that MOS would be nothing but a plus as far as anybody that I saw with a resume that included that.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Steve Wells.
Hey, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Very good.
Thank you for doing this presentation. I appreciate it. I just had two real quick questions. One, you're talking about the technological advances that are ongoing completely. I do know there's the drone in the box that's being utilized in other countries for basically the exact same job you are doing. Do you see that affecting your business plan in the future? Or are you looking at that to move that way in any particular aspect?
Yeah, so I'm
If you can
currently
talk about it, sorry.
well, I'm currently participating on the ARC. Brent knows about this. So we are evaluating a lot of things as a committee for the FAA and how this might impact industry. And I would say that there is a large majority of interest in removing the human from the operation. And some say, I know that typical in manned aircraft accidents, the largest cause is, the pilot error. And so a lot of folks feel like if you can remove, the human in the loop, that you're going to increase safety. I'm not convinced of that. I think otherwise, but there's a lot of folks out there smarter than me that know it'll eventually get to that point. But the drone in the box is currently being used and being explored from several utilities as well as the railroads. So I see it having a use, but I don't see it in a BV loss capacity with complex payloads and other factors that just can't be managed remotely. At least, in the next 5 years, guys. I don't have a crystal ball that looks out that far, but I know there's a lot of folks interested in investing a lot of money in it.
And then just the second part, the last part of my question is, have you noticed the lack of U.S. systems being available, such as, DJI versus all the quads? And then have you had trouble finding systems for you to use due to the fact that you are mapping U.S. infrastructure? And have you noticed a change in government investment or companies themselves wanting to invest in more U.S.-based produced UAS in order to facilitate all these infrastructure type jobs?
Yes, so you probably noticed that both aircraft we use are made in the USA. And you're probably aware that there has been a ban from using DJI and foreign made aircraft from a few countries because of threat of taking some of those images with metadata and critical infrastructure and getting that into the hands of nefarious people. So in order to be compliant with both DoD customers as well as utility customers that want to keep the grid safe, we chose two platforms that were made in the U.S. But absolutely, you are accurate. We desperately would like to see more U.S. made aircraft that are made to a commercial standard. DJI is a great aircraft, and it's very reliable, and it offers a lot of positive things. But one thing that we need in our industry is ability to integrate multiple payloads, and we don't want to be married to the the OEM's payload that only you can integrate or use for their system. There's a void there, and I hope that somebody is seeing that and ready to fill it, because there's a need.
No, thank you. I appreciate answering my questions. And just because I'm a former commo guy and you mentioned you're having issues, if you haven't heard Dragon Link, they are coming out with a new C2 node in the future that is much more robust and has encryption and things like that. You might want to re-engage with them. It's pretty good. Our company was looking at it ourselves.
I have not heard of that, but
It's not officially out yet, but it's coming out. It's for military use, but it's got AES encryption, and supposedly can go 20, 30K off of SAM communication systems. I'm sure you probably use, just to help you out. But thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're just on the C2 side. Yeah, we're using Silvus radios, which is again another commonly used radio, C2 for military. But they can use it for 4 watts. We're limited to 1 watt. So we, again, regulated by the FCC, which limits what we can do.
I'm sorry to hear. I had extensive experience with the Silvus radio the past 4 years. So it's kind of surprising that even at that low wattage, you're having those issues. Yeah, if you want, if I can get your email later date, I might hit up your tech guys and see if there's something I can help them out with if you guys aren't getting the support you need from Silvus. And I have some connections over in Silvus too that I can pass them off to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Esteban, and then I think we need to wrap up.
Hello. I was wondering if you could share more details on the process your company went through to obtain the Beyond Line of Sight waiver. I was wondering how long did it take, and did you hire any consulting or service that walks you through the process and things of that nature? I was wondering if you could share more details on that. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So it took about 2.5 years to gather all of the information that was in the packet for our BV loss waiver. And that was about 8 different subcontractors that we tasked to help build out the ConOp and all of the content of what we supplied. The majority of work really was going through and determining the population density. So if we want to fly over these areas, how do you determine, how many people live in a square kilometer? And so we worked with census data and various other sources and compiled all that together to basically build it out in 1 kilometer grids to show population density by 1 kilometer. And that helped us, overlay that on the utility circuit so we could show what areas we could fly in. Well, beyond that, we had to do the same for road crossings. We are limited to so many cars per hour that we can cross those roads. Obviously, rural roads, dirt roads, those don't have frequent traffic. And we had to, do the science and prove to the FAA that we could show that there's so many cars per hour on a road, and that would either tell us we could fly over it or we couldn't fly over it. Obviously, building out the case of there's no DA technology on the aircraft, so the infrastructure shadowing and infrastructure masking, and creating the an estimate of probability of a midair, and how unlikely that would be. So there was a tremendous amount of science, I would call, that went into that. And, several calls with the FAA, asking about the sources and how we derived all this data. But ultimately, they were satisfied with what we provided them.
Awesome. Thank you for your answer and the presentation. Very informative. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, outstanding. Will, I really do appreciate you coming and speaking with all of us today. This was just an excellent experience. One of the benefits I didn't even realize would be to kind of go through just some of the major acronyms that we have and how those relate to different activities and really topics that are so critical to advancing this field right now. To my students, I just want to put this out there so that you receive credit for participating this week. Make sure you submit a brief discussion post in our week 6 discussion area. Your entry should identify that you were in attendance, and then briefly summarize the insight that you gained, specifically how the info that Will shared supports your examination of difference between unmanned systems and manned platforms, and why their use makes sense for various missions, as well as, make sure to discuss any info that you might not have been previously familiar with and how your overall understanding of the topic has now changed. So if you could do that, we'll be good to go. So with that, thank you again, Will. And I think we got a call tomorrow. So
Yep,
for
we do. All right. Good luck to you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Here.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You.